Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Toys of Mass Destruction, where we're hoping to bring you all the best content, all the best information about all of our favourite armies. Today, we've got a brand new topic, and I've got James with us here today. Say hi.
Hi, how good?
Yeah, all good. Can't complain, can't complain. And today, we're going to be talking about, I assume, to be now your favourite army, the Necrons.
Yes, yes. No, generally they are now. Haven't always been, and I think I've probably played them consistently for about 5 years now.
Yeah, it's been a while. I remember you first picking them up a long time ago, now that I think about it. Yeah, it feels like you've played them forever, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and it's fair to say, since Ninth Edition, when they got, all their brand new boys, their shiny new toys, I would say they're probably the army that's changed the most in the meta.
It's been a rough ride. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. So I just remember comparing them from how they were on release to now and the changes that they've had throughout the years. And yeah, as you said, it's been a bit wild.
Yeah, I mean it's the kind of thing where you can buy the codex off the shelf, and 50% of the rules in that codex are no longer viable.
Mm, yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's the kind of level of changes we're really talking about.
Mm. Yeah, and obviously this has been a fact. This has been a change because of all the balanced data slates that GW have been bringing out, essentially tweaking the rules of all the armies, and it essentially changes the whole meta as it goes along. And this is one of the armies that is the biggest example of that, with the amount of changes that they've had, and even not just the balanced data slates, it's also the new books that are coming out, and especially in this case, Arks of Omen and Arks of Omen totally changing how the game works. And yeah, so what were your thoughts when it comes to Arks of Omen, changing up all the missions, new secondaries, everything like that? What were your first thoughts when you read the book?
Yes, I mean Arks of Omen is kind of been the biggest change to Necron since Nephilim. Where everything got core, protocols changed, so you got one active for the whole game, which is effectively an extra chapter tactic almost. Arcs kind of toned down some of the kind of more powerful Necron builds.
Hmm.
The key thing was it removed the kind of objective secured pre-game move or OBSEC build, which meant you could only pick OBSEC as your main faction, a bit like they did for Eldar with I forget the trait, the one with the shuriken.
Hail of Doom?
Hail of Doom, that's the one.
Yeah.
Um, so that's gone. That no longer exists. So you can no longer run the pre-game move OBSEC build, which is pretty much what the majority of Necron competitive players were running towards the
Yeah,
end of Nephilim and
pretty
pretty much
much.
throughout most of Ninth, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, a lot of the competitive lists you saw at tournaments were the Relentless Expansionists and whatever the name of the other
Eternal
one was.
Conquerors.
That was it, yeah. So pre-game move, OBSEC on everything, and it was massive. It helped the army out massively competitively, as you know.
Well, I think
And
the pre-game move was good, but even on missions like Abandoned Sanctuaries, having everything OBSEC means you can trade objectives with anything in your army. You can throw that Cryptek on an objective that's held by 10 Terminators and hold it. And that's it. They
disgusting.
can't do anything about it.
Disgusting. I absolutely hated it every single time it happened.
And this kind of compounded on the fact that Necron's got some incredibly strong secondaries. Now, the big Arks of Omen change is Code of Combat no longer exists. So there's no killing stuff with the Silent King or Nobles. But let's be honest, the Silent King. And there's no... I mean, the Purge of the Vermin does exist, but it's no longer wholly within quarters. So you can sit a nice little model right in the middle of the board, and then they get no points for quarters. It's not good now. It was very strong. It did need a bit of a nerf. I would have liked them to have just removed the turn one scoring from it. Here we are. This is what they've done.
Yeah, it feels weird that, like as you said, you could just have a single model in the center of the board and it totally shuts it down. It feels weird it didn't have a wording similar to the Chaos Demon secondary, where they got to be in quarters, but it specifically states that units within 6 of the center do not count towards this.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been another really good way of doing it, and another way that we've seen them kind of also try with other armies. Bit of a shame, really, because Purge was a really nice battlefield supremacy slot.
Yeah, definitely.
However, Ancient Machineries and Treasure of the Aeons both got off pretty lightly.
Yes, they
Ancient
did.
Machineries is this is the secondary where if you do an action on an objective that isn't in your deployment zone, you get 4 points. If you're OBSEC, which is where the whole army OBSEC comes in, it completes at the end of your turn. If you're not OBSEC, it's at the beginning of your command phase.
Disgusting. Oh, it's horrible. I
Really,
hate it.
really strong. Really, really, really strong.
Yeah.
And then Treasure of the Aeons is your opponent picks 3 objectives that aren't in their deployment zone, and you get 2, 3, or 4 points, depending on how many you hold, up to 3 that they picked. This went down from 2, 3, and 5 points. So pretty minor nerf, really.
Okay. Yeah, you're still scoring a lot of points in specific missions.
Yeah, it's really strong on those missions, and there's a lot of them out there that have 2 objectives in kind of like 1 in the opponent's deployment, 1 in your deployment, and 3 in the middle. Because they have to pick 3. They're never going to pick your objective, so they're always going to be the 3 in the middle. And you want to be contesting those ones anyway, so you're basically being rewarded for playing the game.
Yeah, missions like Abandoned Sanctuaries and Data Scry Salvage, you're just laughing. It's such a good secondary.
Exactly, you know. And then even the missions like Data Scry Salvage, where there's 4 of them, they're all 4 in the middle. They're all on the line. So they're all equally distant from both of you. So it's not that difficult, even when there are 4 objective missions out there. The kind of one exception really is Tide of Convergence. Now, the way the 2 secondaries work is the missions Ancient Machineries is harder on, Treasure of the Aeons is usually easier, and the missions where Treasure of the Aeons is harder, Ancient Machineries is easier.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I still think they work pretty well together.
There's 2 very, very solid secondaries, even now, you know, slight changes. I think Ancient Machineries also had the vehicle element removed, so vehicles can no longer do it, which realistically you weren't really using vehicles to do that anyway. Especially because even with vehicles being core, the main vehicles I was running were the Doom Sites, which couldn't do actions anyway.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting as well because, like you said, the 2 Necron secondaries that are still decent, you're probably going to be taking in most games. But unfortunately, with Purge the Vermin, I think you said it was Battlefield Supremacy. That was the category it was in. Yeah, so unfortunately, that's not as good. But Arks of Omen did change another specific Battlefield Supremacy secondary.
Both Engage and Behind Enemy Lines are 2 very solid secondaries now. And there's been a few missions now I've tried Engage out, and it's not the easy 45 points you used to be able to get as Necrons, but it's a solid 10 points.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, it's, you know, fine. I'll take a solid 10, especially on a hard mission. So I find on a mission like Recover the Relics, where it might be harder to get into the enemy's deployment zone, going for Engage on all fronts and saying, right, I'll just get 10 points this game for it. That's my goal. If I get more, great. But I'm aiming for 10.
Yeah, like 10 is still an incredibly respectable score in any secondary.
But, so it's kind of brought Necron's kind of capabilities to score hundreds slightly down. But you can still aim for 90, 95 pretty comfortably.
Yeah, definitely. So with all these Arks of Omen changes, obviously, there's a lot of things that directly impacted Necrons, the change to the secondaries and the balanced data slate and everything like that. But another important factor was the balanced data slate changes that didn't affect Necrons directly, but affected other armies. So most importantly, probably being the removal of Armor of Contempt. So
this was real big, actually. I think, you know, going from your Scorpec and Locust Destroyers with their AP3, going from the opponent having a 5-up save to a 6-up save is huge. And with the prevalence of Marines coming back into it, everyone has a Marine army. Most people do. You know, when you start 40k, you buy the start box and there's some Marines in there.
Yeah.
People, you know, Marines are popular. They're a not terrible army now, we're seeing a lot more of them. I know we have in the tournaments we've played since. And hey, AP3 is really good into them again.
It's really, really good into Marines, yeah.
And the stuff that has AP3 and Necrons is the stuff you want to be taking anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that before, where you would struggle to deal with big Terminator blobs, that if they still had Armor of Contempt with all that free war gear, they'd be incredible. But without it, it means you still have a way to deal that punch that Necrons need to deal.
Absolutely. And I think that, that you'd run into those Storm Shield Terminators or the Scarab Occult, and you just put your head in your hands because you think nothing in my army can kill this unit. And now actually you run a unit of 6 Scorpec into them, and you're picking up most of the unit.
Yeah, the damage output that Scorpec put out with they have AP4 on some of their weapons, don't they?
AP4 and the damage 3, which into Terminators is that's exactly the profile you want.
It's exactly what you want. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So these changes benefiting Necrons massively. You would expect to, at least. Like the units you could take are suddenly now more effective into more of the meta game. And you also got some pretty nice point changes, I think.
Completely blew me away. I did not expect point decreases.
Yeah, same. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I kind of suspected they may touch Warriors, because Warriors have been this kind of awkward model where they've almost been good, and they're the kind of main troop choice of Necrons. When someone thinks Necrons, you think of Warriors, and they've not been amazing, but they haven't been terrible. But if you don't want to run the kind of the OBSEC builds, you have to take something that has OBSEC. So you're either with Immortals or Warriors. So I suspected they would touch one of them, and I thought it was probably going to be Warriors rather than Immortals. And they did. Warriors went down to 11 points, which is really good.
So good, man. So good.
And they decreased Tomb Blades again, which blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. Because the thing for Tomb Blades is not amazingly strong in terms of damage output or kind of survivability. You have to pay points for the invuln and the extra armor save. You don't really want to be doing on that unit. You have to pay points for Tesla or Gorse. Again, when you're adding 5 points on for a weapon that on a unit that's not probably going to survive being shot at, it's not worth it.
No.
So reducing their base cost was about the perfect thing you could do for them. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it means you just keep them cheap and cheerful, bog standard as they are, and they just do their job, and they do it so well.
Well, it's 54 points for 3.
Oh God!
I mean, it's just they're so good.
They're so good,
and you combine them with the fact that they can do ancient machineries, they can tag that early treasures, so you can score those 4 points or 3 points in turn 1 as well. Then, my opinion, every list should have at least a unit of 3 Tomb Blades in.
Yeah.
Just for doing that very thing. Even if you're not running kind of OBSEC or Nihilak, which we'll get onto Nihilak in a minute. You need a unit of 3 Tomb Blades.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like you had some great point changes pretty much across the board, and we'll go into more detail as we start to discuss individual units and how they place in certain Necron lists.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next thing, as you said, that we wanted to discuss was since the changes to, as you said, the removal of being able to take pre-game move and full army OBSEC, now definitely changes what kind of dynasty you'd want to take. Well, we'll kind of look at 2 of the dynasties that you're a big fan of and you think are probably going to be the way forward. So tell us more about them.
Well, I think, so definitely these 2, because I think having lost the OBSEC pre-game move, we had to pivot somewhere. And actually, that made it really, really exciting to be a Necron player when Arks of Omen came out. Because we'd effectively been playing pre-game move OBSEC for about 4 years. So to actually think, oh no, I can try some of these other factions that might be worth doing, might be good. Great. And obviously the obvious pivot is you go to Nihilak, which is everything is OBSEC. The second half to trait is you ignore AP1 in your deployment zone. I have to say, having played Nihilak quite a bit now, it's maybe come up once, maybe twice.
It's not too often. Like, let's be real, you're not taking it for the AP-1.
You're not.
Like that might as well just go away, as far as you're concerned.
And I think the protocol is. I think it's the. Oh, I think
I
it's the
think
one
it's
where
the
you.
one. I think it's the one
It's
where you can
everything in cover
Overwatch.
and everything on Overwatch is on fives.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, well, set to defend. I think it is. Basically.
Yes, yeah, that is it.
Really, really solid protocol. I mean, there are some better ones, but for a permanent protocol, especially if you want to put it in turn one,
Mm.
really solid. There are some worse ones you could have.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really good for, especially with new upcoming armies like World Eaters are
this
suddenly
is it.
appearing in the meta, and they don't really have any ways to ignore Overwatch other than maybe if a transport happens to get a charge in, they might be able to charge in with that first. But if you're able to do it on 8-bound or Berserkers, it can actually make a big deal.
It does. It does. I mean, yeah, you're on the sharp end of that on the
Yeah.
weekend.
And can't get over it. It just feels so weird that when it comes to the custom dynasties, you can take either full army obsec and
Yeah.
that's all you get,
That's it.
or you can just go Nihilak and you get obsec and ignore AP1 and you get both activations of a protocol when it's active.
And you get so the relic's not amazing, but the stratagem is just you can do actions and shoot.
Oh, that's so good.
And you want to be
Like,
doing ancient machine use every turn.
yeah.
So now you can take your units of locust destroyers. If you're running the big blobs of 9 tomb blades,
Mm.
you brush them up the board with all the buffs and action and shoot.
That's
And
just
it means
terrifying.
you don't have to rely on being in sudden storm to do that.
Mm.
Sudden storm being the protocol where you either get +1 movement or you can do actions and shoot.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's so good because like your opponent might think, hey, he's taking this secondary, which means sure he can score points, but then he's not shooting at me. I'm kind of totally fine with that. And he might think this unit's the only one in range of the objective, so he's probably going to do the action with that unit, not expecting
Yeah.
to suddenly take a whole barrage of shots out of nowhere.
I mean, this is it, and this is why, I'm saying, as Arks of Omen came out, it made it a lot more exciting to try and build lists and slate Necrons because you could go Nihilak and think, actually, I'm not just relying on my pre-game move to get those early points. I'm not relying on the pre-game move to apply some pressure. Like there are other ways I can go now and play, and that's nothing but exciting, really.
Yeah, definitely. You never like it when the list building gets so stale that you just want to run the same.
Yeah, well, this is it. And I mean, I'd ran my twin Doom Scythe destroy build for about 9 months, and 9 months of competitive play with the same list gets a little bit stale towards the end.
Yeah, it definitely does.
So the other one really that's interested me is Novok.
Yeah, Novok's very different to Nihilak.
Very different
approach, it looks like.
And it was what I was running before shifting over to OPSEC pre-game move. And the extra charge, the extra AP on with Hungry Void all the time, really, really strong. So you can put Hungry Void in for those two. You got a Silent King, you got his Warlord trait, you put it on turn 2 and 3. You can get things like Flayed ones up to AP3, which is real good.
That's scary, man. I've seen what Flayed ones can do without the AP3. Like
Exactly.
That's just terrifying, honestly.
Yeah. And it also lets you, this whole thing we're talking about, when you're not pure OPSEC, you're going to want to take some Warriors or Immortals, maybe a mixture of both. Actually, now your Warriors, there's Novok. You can rush them into something. They've got Mine Will Be Done. They're hitting on 2s. They're Strength 4. Strength 5 in Hungry Void if you're in those 2 turns. They're AP 1. And then the Novok stratagem, you just give them an extra attack. So your unit of Warriors, which historically and kind of traditionally not very good in combat, punch real hard.
I thought World Eaters was supposed to be the melee faction. Like, what is this? Nah, it's like it just makes everything in your army such a credible melee threat that if you're up against another melee army and you're worried that they're going to be able to tag your units or whatever like that, you don't have to worry as much. You always have a counter charge available.
And this is the thing with, obviously World Eater is very popular, very new, very fresh. They might think, I'll charge the score peg with my 8-bound. I'll charge Berserkers into the Warriors. I don't need to worry about the Warriors. Actually, if you're playing Novok, you need to worry about the Warriors.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And as you said, Novok have the stratagems for extra attack, was it, that they get?
Yeah, so it's blood rights. It's +1 CP +1 attack on a
That's
core unit.
such good value. And like you said, on 20 warriors, that's 20 extra attacks for
Exactly.
1 CP. They ain't on twos.
I know,
What is
I know.
this?
And if you throw the Lord's Will in there from a Lord, rerolling ones. If they're near the Silent King, rerolling all wounds.
Oh god.
It's just suddenly they're hitting really hard.
That's foul. That is foul.
Right.
Yeah, it just makes you so efficient.
Yeah, it
And
really, really does.
especially with the Silent King, like you said, giving you all those rerolls. And I definitely see why you are so attracted to these two dynasties. Like they play very differently, but they both fulfill what you want to achieve.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And they do play very differently, but the kind of one caveat to Necrons I will kind of and have experienced is we do have a lot of units we can take from. There's not loads competitively that are worth taking.
Mm.
So you're kind of then restricted to taking destroyers, flayed ones, warriors now, which is not. Everyone would love more unit flexibility in their army, and
Yeah.
Necrons aren't alone in that.
Yeah, definitely. But speaking of units, this is probably going to be the bulk of this video. We want to really talk about the units that you like, especially that I've seen you use a lot in your lists, and they do really well. You play them really, really well. So, yeah, where would you like to start?
Well, we'll go with destroyers because destroyers of all flavors are all very good, and they're good for very different reasons. Scorpec destroyers have really been the mainstay kind of unit of Necrons since they came out. Really, they've been very good, very efficient, very strong, pretty much good into every unit you'd want them to be good into, and they've consistently performed. They did get a points decrease, I think, about this time last year.
Yeah,
That's how steady.
How many points are they? I feel like they're 30, something like
They're
that.
30 points now.
Right.
Which is
a bargain.
really cheap. Toughness 5, strength 5, AP 3 on the weapons, 3 attacks each. The Threshers give them the extra attack. The Canoptic Plasma Sight can give them another one. He's a really useful little tool with the bigger Scorpec or Ophidian Destroyer units because you can add +1 attack to the unit. If you do roll a 1, you lose 1. But then you add 5 extra attacks. So you lose the attacks from that one destroyer, but you're still on the same amount of attacks you would have been even though you've lost him. And you still get the extra point of strength.
Yeah, of course. I totally forgot it gives that as well. I thought it just gave the attack.
So, I mean, Scorpec, I don't need to go too much into them. I think everybody knows how good they are. If you let a unit of Scorpec go wild, they will run through an army.
Yeah, and people often forget about, is it Whirling Blades?
Whirling Blades. I think it's Whirling Blades. They spin really, really fast, and it makes -1 to wound.
So
Still don't understand physically how that works, but we're going to go with it.
They're spinning so quick, like you just can't keep up.
Literal helicopters.
Yeah, why doesn't it give them fly? What is this?
It would make more sense.
But no, like they're pretty fast as well, especially Ophidians.
That's like the move 8, 9 with if they're near a noble, 10 in Southern Storm. Relatively quick, not kind of in that nice range where they move slightly faster than 6, like most things move, but they're not running around too quick that it becomes a problem.
They're a very good like mid-range threat in the sense that you have your other units like Tomb Blades that can just fly up super quickly, and then your Scorpec are there for the turn 2, turn 3 engagements.
And this is exactly how I play them. That they're always that kind of threat behind either the flayed ones or the warriors, where once they've dealt with the warriors, the Scorpec then come in and pick up whatever is there. And I mean, I had a Space Wolf game the other day where his Wolfen came in, killed all the flayed ones, Terminators came in, killed the Silent King, Scorpec come out and picked up the rest of the Terminators and the Wolfen, and then just ran through the whole flank.
Yeah, that's like you said, their counter charge potential is so high.
Yeah.
Like if you manage to deal with the army's main threat that would deal with Scorpec, they're just gonna do whatever the hell they like.
And the really powerful thing, kind of going back to spinning their blades really fast, is there are certain units that would be good into that T5 3 wound model, that when they go into there and you put that -1 to wound on, suddenly you're not very good into them.
No, definitely not.
You know, I mean, I have had games where you activate that -1 to wound, they're then wounding you on 5s because they're only strength 5 normally, and then they kill a score pick. And then that unit, the 5 score pick remaining, just pick up the rest of the unit.
Yeah, they're just all round really solid. Like
Really solid.
I can't really see any faults with them. They've got just enough movement speed to be like a credible melee threat. They have the damage output like in spades.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
and
they're
it's
core as well, so they
yeah,
get
of
all
course,
the
yeah.
buffs that come with being core.
Mm.
The only drawback, they don't have an invuln, which is easily replicated when you stick a Chronomancer on them, and then
There's a
you're fine.
character. There's a character that
Um,
does exactly that. Yeah. Also
exactly.
gives them reroll charges.
Who would
Exactly
have
what they
known?
wanted. Yeah. But
Um,
yeah. So you got really solid like melee destroyers. So what about ranged ones?
well, so I was going to say, so kind of on Scorpeg, you've got the
Oh
Ophidians,
yeah.
which have been this kind of semi Scorpeg like unit that's a bit squishier,
Mm.
that can deep strike, but nobody ever really took them because they didn't ever do the job as well as Scorpeg.
Mm.
That's the meta's shifted, or they've come in a lot more recently. I really like Ophidians, have done for a long time.
Yeah, they definitely feel like the underdogs, like very overlooked.
I mean, it's small units of 3 just popping around, picking up, little units here and there. And then when you want to turn that pressure on, use that +1 strength strat, use the Canoptic Plasma Sight, get them that extra attack. They have a ludicrous amount of attacks, really.
Yeah, they really do.
Same as the score. Say it's the same as the score pick, except the Reap Blades explode on 6s,
Nice.
and they each get an extra 2 attacks with their claws.
Wow. That's a lot of attacks.
So, and I have tried using units of 10, units of 10, units of 6. Units of 10 would be amazing.
Oh god, no. Nightmares. Nightmares right there.
And I do find them a little bit unwieldy, just in, they move 10 inches, so they're a little bit faster than Skullpeg. But trying to get a unit of 10 in those small little holes you want them in, I always find 2 units of 3 are a lot easier to kind of use and get that efficiency out of.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially when you couple the fact they can deep strike for 1 CP.
Yeah,
So 1 CP in your movement phase, they go back underground, come back in the next turn. When you've taken a secondary, like behind enemy lines or engage on all fronts, you can then pop them away, bring them up, score those extra few points later in the game. Perfect unit for it.
so good. So good. They just have so much versatility to them. God, I'm butchering that pronunciation. But yeah, they just seem to do. They're like a little toolbox unit, exactly as you said.
Really are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I struggle to build a list without 3 in.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see why you would want to include at least 3 of them in every list.
So, and that now we can come on to shooty destroyers. I know you want to get there.
No. It's a valid point. Ophidians are great. Scorpeg are great. But I'll be honest, these are the ones that now scare me. The ranged ones. Oh,
So
no.
obviously, there's technically 3 types. You've got the Hexmark, the Locust Destroyers, and then the Heavy Locust Destroyers. The Heavy Locust Destroyers, I'm really going back on forward on. Whenever I use a unit of 2 or 3, the big shot does 3d3 damage, looks really good on paper. In actual reality, you end up only ever getting 1 wound through, and then it's either 5 damage or 6 damage, and you're not really getting the full use out of it. But you can put one of those in the unit of 6 Locust Destroyers, which Locust Destroyers, Scorpeg, Ophidians, all 3 wounds, toughness 5. The perfect target for all those damage 3 weapons everybody knows and loves. Having a big heavy destroyer in there really swings that efficiency, especially when they kill 2 or 3 and you're rolling extra reanimation dice to see if you get a destroyer back. And because the heavy one's in the pool, you roll 4, you roll 3 for another destroyer, and then another 3 for another one. Generally, you're a lot more likely to get a destroyer back than you would normally. If you kill 3 Skullpeg destroyers, absolutely, statistically, you're likely to get 1 back. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've lost 3, rolled the 9 dice, and not got 1 back.
Oh, it's such a feels bad. Like,
and it's just, but having that 1 extra dice roll with the heavy destroyer, pretty much always get 1 back.
Yeah.
I don't know why it works like that, but for some reason it does.
And like you said, like it's so useful against those damage 3 weapons that would love to shoot into destroyers. Each shot kills one,
Yeah.
but then when you take them on the heavy destroyer first, they're suddenly killing not as many as expected. You
Yeah.
get that reanimation back, and then a technomancer or something is an absolute
Yeah.
dickhead.
He is. He is.
and just brings
He's
them
bringing
straight
one
on back.
and this, I mean, this is exactly how I use them as a unit of 7 with a Technomancer, with a Veil. You put the Silent King's Might Will Be Done on them. They reroll ones to hit anyway, and then you fling them somewhere in the board. Hopefully not turn 1, because that never seems to work out for me. But later in the game, veiling them turn 2 or 3, getting them into that target, using the 2 CP reroll wound strat. You're then hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, rerolling all wounds. It's just horrific.
That is horrific. Absolutely.
And they're all AP3.
AP3, when, as we discussed with Armor of Contempt gone, that's a big deal.
Now, the kind of one big drawback from them is they are D3 damage.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is amazing. You just roll 3s all day, and other times you roll 1s and you kill nothing.
Yeah. I've seen it happen a few times, to say the least.
Yeah. And they're just really, and for a unit of efficiency wise, just they are perfect. You know, they fly, they move 8, they're infantry, so they can breach through walls. They're core, so they get all the core buffs, and then they reroll pretty much almost everything. Especially when you read the Silent King, because then he's given his aura out. They can reroll all hits. One thing I've been doing quite a lot recently is spending 3 CP, 1 for auto winning on 6s, and then 2 for reroll wounds, just to kind of maximize as many of those damage D3 shots as you can get through as possible.
Yeah, out of like 15 shots, is that 3 shots each they get?
It's 3 shots each, so it's 18 shots plus the big guy.
That's it, yeah. So out of those 18 shots, with all those rerolls and stratagems, you're going to get like 15 wounds or something through.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that is terrifying.
Yeah,
but
it's really strong.
The only drawback, like as you said, with these destroyers, the D3 damage and 3 CP, like don't get me wrong, it's a lot of wounds.
It's a lot.
It is a lot of CP, but luckily, Necrons have a big floating buoy that lets you start with a lot more CP.
You know who gives you 3 CP?
Who's that? Who's that, James?
Silent King gives you 3 CP.
Does he? Whoa, that's incredible. Tell us more about him.
I mean, we could have a whole episode on why the Silent King is good. I still legitimately think for 400 points, he is one of the best things in the game.
He's incredible. Like, there's no arguing against it. If someone tries to tell you that, I don't know, I don't think the Silent King's worth it. No, you're wrong.
You're not building a 2,000 point list. You're building a 1,600 point list.
Yeah, he's so good. But tell us why he works.
I think part of why he's so good with the kind of, we play UKTC terrain. We play in the UK a lot. There's a lot of obscuring terrain. There's a lot of ruins. He's obscurable because he's only got 16 wounds. So the fact that you can hop him around the board behind ruins, you can't be shot at, that's amazing. Sign me up.
It's so good.
The kind of four main reasons. The 3 CP, as we've talked about. Some of the really good Necron stratagems are 2 CP. So when you're spending a few on relics and warlord traits, you're only starting on 2 or 3 CP. You put Silent King in, you're then starting on 5 CP. So you could afford to spend those stratagems early and still have, your -1 to hit on Flayed ones, your -1 to wound on Scorpeg, your 1 CP to relocate your Ophidians, your 1 CP to auto wound something. You've still got access to those.
Yeah.
Or a 2 CP interrupt, or a reroll if you really need it. You can still use those as well as your reroll wounds, as well as your +1 to hit if you're Sautech, or I think it's 1 CP in Mephrit stratagem. Amazing. Like, just having that extra resource, you just can't frown at. Anybody would give anything for an extra 3 CP.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then on top of that, you get reroll hits in shooting and reroll wounds in melee. And the main way I use him is kind of once you've dealt with the kind of first wave of Necrons, the Skull Peck are coming up, and then after the Skull Peck, the Silent King pops out.
Yeah.
And he sits behind a ruin, turns 1 to 3. He gives all the warriors reroll hits. He gives the Locust Destroyers reroll hits. I'm stringing a unit of Flayed ones back to him for reroll wounds. The Skull Peck have come out. They've got reroll wounds. He makes the army so incredibly efficient.
Yeah. And that's the important thing. You would look at an ability like that and be like, oh, it's okay. He picks a unit. It's only one. No. Yeah. It's not pick a unit. It's just everyone. Yeah.
And I take Conquering Tyrant as my permanent protocol. Pretty much every single game, I take that as my permanent one. No matter what list I'm taking, if I have the Silent King, that's my permanent. Because being able to make his auras 9 inches, I mean, he's already on a pretty big base. And 9 inches again, you're covering a huge area around.
Yeah, it's like having 5 chapter masters in your army.
I mean, it's effectively having two chapter masters, plus a guy who gives you CP, plus a deny, which Necrons don't really have an awful lot of anyway. And then the third thing is he gives you 2 My Will Be Dones, which generally you have to pay 2 CP for an Overlord. So not only is he free in terms of that respect, he gives you 3 CP. He lets you pick 2 units for My Will Be Done. So again, increasing the efficiency of your units even more. And then he gives you a 4-up deny stratagem.
Of course he does.
So I mean, everybody knows Necron's worst historically their worst matchups are matchups with Psykers.
Definitely.
I mean, I come up against Thousand Suns and it hurts every time.
Yeah.
But being able to just go 4-up, can't do it.
Yeah, it's
so strong.
It's one of those stratagems where I play World Eaters. I have the exact same stratagem where most of the time you roll it and you're just like, oh, what a waste of a CP. I just rolled a 3. It's done absolutely nothing. But there will be those games where you roll it and you just go, cool, I just won the game.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, there's no other way to say it, really. Especially when we're seeing the prevalence of people taking Warp Ritual, people taking, psychic secondaries, like being able to just make the opponent question whether they want to because of that 4-up. Really, really strong. Especially because, if you on UKTC, most of them have a medium L blocker near the middle objective or near the middle of the board. So being able to pop him within 18 inches of the middle of the board, they're going to want to do Warp Ritual early. He's going to stop that.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, even people that have built their lists around a psychic secondary because maybe their other secondaries aren't as strong, and suddenly when you tell them that and they're questioning, oh, well maybe I shouldn't take it, they're tricking themselves into picking a suboptimal secondary when realistically Warp Ritual, they're probably still going to get 7 or 12 even against you.
Yeah.
And then if they don't take it for a secondary that only gets them 5, you're laughing.
And that's actually, I mean, that exactly happened on the weekend where I played a guy he had Grey Knights, was planning on taking Warp Ritual. That's how he built his list. And then his backup choice was the one where they do the psychic powers on each objective.
Purifying Ritual, yeah.
And he didn't take a psychic secondary and went for Retrieve Battlefield Data and then he scored 8.
Yeah, I'm assuming his list just wasn't built for it.
Not really. I mean, he was using Inceptors and Servitors, which don't get +1, don't automatically do it. He did actually roll every time and get it the turn he did it. But even so, you're then gambling your points where you built your list to not gamble.
Yeah, definitely. It makes their super optimal list suddenly a little bit suboptimal, which gives you the advantage.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is it. If you have one model who, if you can keep him alive for a few turns, he's going to make your army super efficient. You're going to kill what you need to kill to trade in the right places you want to trade in. And when he does get stuck in, and if he does die, it's just a 1 CP strat to automatically explode.
Which and I feel like it's quite a big explosion, isn't it? How much damage does it do?
It's real big. I mean, firstly, it's not a D3 or a flat 3. It's a D6, which is horrific. And I have killed a lot of things you probably shouldn't just by exploding. This weekend, I killed Caldor Drago. I killed a chaplain on full wounds. And then the kind of even on top of that, it's a 2d6 aura.
2d6.
It's 2d6.
What?
Yeah,
that's incredible. That is
I rolled a 10 in game 2, and I killed a destroyer and I killed a lord of mine.
Yeah, wow.
Didn't matter because I killed Drago, put a Dread Knight down to 1, killed 2 Inceptors and a Purgation squad die.
That is,
and that's after he's done his attacks. He's already killed a character and a couple of other guys. He then dies. He explodes. It's everything you want in one kind of self-contained model, even ignoring all the shooting and melee he does, which isn't insignificant.
Like, I thought Fight on Death was broken. Like, he's basically fighting on death and everything.
Exploding on death is what.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. And I mean, like in combat as well, like you said, he hits pretty hard. His shooting, your best hope a vehicle's not visible. Like, because if he can see a vehicle,
one or the other.
Yeah. And he's got fly, so you can put him in that medium L blocker.
That's it. You can keep him in your big one. You know, obviously anyone who plays UKTC know you have a massive L. He hides in that perfectly. You know, you can keep him there, hop him over turn 1, hop him over turn 2. You know, keep him safe. He's amazing, especially in those types of terrain boards where you can keep him obscured into turns 3 and 4 of the game.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and I do think he is in contention for the best model in the game. He is.
It's just, I think he's on his own. If you took him in a 1v1 fight, you know, there are going to be models that are going to be better than him.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you can give efficient units like Locust Destroyers, Skullpeck Destroyers, Necron Warriors, Necron Flayed ones, like when you can give them more efficiency, you can't really argue.
No, you're effectively, I would argue, you're effectively doubling the efficiency of your entire army just by spending about 400 points.
That's it. And it's as long as you can keep him hidden, and this is what I always do with when I play them. I keep him kind of behind the line a little bit for those earlier turns, stringing units out to get those rerolls, to get that efficiency. So when he does come out, the early part of my list has already dealt with a lot of the stuff that could kill him.
Yeah.
And if they haven't, he pops out, fires his men his, and then he's done it himself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And like, he's just so good. Like,
he's amazing.
Every time, it's very rare, but every time I see a list without the Silent King, it just makes me question, like, what's your plan there? Like, he feels as close to an auto take as it could possibly be.
I would still say post Arks of Omen, he's still an auto take competitively.
Yeah, no, definitely. And to be fair, I do feel like most people know that. Most people know that when they're playing against Necrons, Silent King is probably going to be there, and he is. He is not to be underestimated.
I think there are some skew lists you can build. You know, you could go real heavy on Warriors with Nefrek, which gives them a 6-up invuln.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably some legs to a list like that in a team tournament, or if you get some lucky matchups in a singles. We saw the triple obelisk, triple monolith list over in the US do very well. Yeah. The problem for us is we play UKTC standardized terrain. Monoliths can't move half the way around the map.
They're just too fat.
If you can use those kind of lists, you don't need the Silent King for those.
Nah, absolutely.
But again, outside of those kind of fringe skew lists, he's your auto take.
Yeah, and like we said, everyone knows he's an auto take. But the next unit I really want to talk about is a unit that I don't think people realize is as good as it is. And it's taken front and center in our pictures, you can see here. So tell us more about it.
So the Convergence of Dominion is the terrain piece. For those of people who don't know, there's 3 of them. They're little monolith pillars, as you can see. They went down to 80 points.
Pretty cheap.
Which works out about 27 points a model, which is less than a point a wound. So just their stats basically. They have a strength 4, AP 3, 3 damage gun. Their hits on 4s. Nothing.
It's pretty decent.
Damage 3. It's going to be great when you get it in there. You can use that 1 CP strat to auto wound if you really need something dead, and they don't have a. Maybe they've only got a 4-up save or a 3-up save and no invuln. I have actually done that to an Armager and finished one off.
Oh god,
which was quite funny.
That poor Armager.
They've got 10 wounds, a 3-up armor save.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, their toughness 8.
That's 27 points for the model.
Which is amazing.
What?
And if we're coming back into talking about engage and behind enemy lines, this is where this unit shines.
Yeah.
A Cryptek can do an action on it. Obviously, when a Cryptek does an action, he loses all his auras. Now, the 2 Crypteks you mostly see, the Chronomancer and the Cryptek with the Canoptic Cloak, the Technomancer.
Yeah.
Don't have auras.
Oh, it's a shame,
or not
isn't
auras
it?
that you really want. So fine. You send one of the Convergence into kind of reserves, and then he comes back next turn.
Yep.
And he goes back anywhere on the board.
Yeah.
So you can do it turn 1, you can do it turn 2, you can do it turn 4.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm saying, this engage on all fronts behind enemy lines really comes into it, because you can send a Convergence away turn 3, send one away turn 4, and then in turn 4 and 5, pop one in a quarter you've lost a unit in, pop it in a deployment zone. Mm-hmm. Continue scoring those points later into the game when you've lost your Tomb Blades, you've lost your Ophidians. You can't reach as far because you've lost your fast-moving units. Suddenly, you teleport a Convergence of Dominion over there, you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And on top of the fact...
Yep.
Sorry, go on.
No, let's carry on, please.
I was going to say, on top of the fact that you can just use them for screening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done it where, you send one away because you haven't taken behind enemy lines or engaged on all fronts. Mm-hmm. You send one away and then plonk it right in the middle of the board.
Yeah.
They now can't deep strike anywhere within 9 of that.
Mm-hmm.
In your home objective, you've got, one here, and they can't go within 9 of those, so they can't do their behind enemy lines if they've taken it, or, Harlequins would struggle to kind of send something back into the webway and bring it back in to get their last few points.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's come up for me before, where they haven't done that because they can't, because the Convergence are just sat there screening the whole deployment.
Yeah,
and they're only 80 points.
Yeah, it's so good, and it's what I wanted to talk about, because not a lot of people realize the scoring potential with these guys, because they're a fortification, and before Arks of Omen, you never really saw fortifications. Like, you had to take a whole separate detachment for them, and they just weren't worth it. So people didn't really fully know the rules intricacies you can use with them. So most people know that buildings, fortifications can't do actions, and they can't hold objectives. That's just because they're buildings. They wouldn't be able to do such things. But nowhere does it state that they cannot contribute to scoring secondaries.
No.
And their vehicles, they are still units as part of your army. So, like you said, you teleport it into corners of the map, you teleport into the enemy's deployment zone. They're getting you engaged, they're getting you behind enemy lines. And who wants to shoot it? They have to dedicate something powerful to it.
This is exactly it. Where I've used it when I've seen it come up really strong is where I've sent one, I've managed to squeeze in a little corner of deployment zone, especially on the missions with the diagonal deployment zones, where they're quite hard to screen the whole thing out. Pop one in the corner, but then your Flayed ones are in front of them. You've got a unit of Scorpec that's visible. The Locusts are on a ruin shooting at you. Do you really want to turn your anti-tank to the thing behind you that's not in range of anything and it's not doing anything harmful? Or do you want to fire it at the thing that's killing you? You're always going to go with the second.
I want to kill the thing that's killing me, please. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, I've had games where I've managed to squeeze one in turn 2 and it stayed there for the whole game. Because they either haven't had the resources, because there's also, flip it on the other side. If you do want to send something to try and kill it, a unit on your backfield objective isn't going to be something that's dedicated to killing a toughness 8 vehicle, because they're also vehicles. funnily enough.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Like toughness 8, 10 wounds. Like, and they're cheap. They're just so good.
Just really
Like,
cheap. Really,
like
really
it's.
cheap.
I don't. I'll be honest. I haven't looked at many Necron lists outside of yours. You're the Necron player that I play against the most. I haven't seen many people take these yet. Like, I know a
No,
couple that do, but it's not very often. I've yet to really see it in a tournament. People taking the Convergence, and you use it to such good effectiveness, and they're really underrated.
really, really underrated. And I think, cheap, very versatile, and if you're not spending 80 points on them, there's not an awful lot else that's worth as much for 80 points, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely agree. And yeah, so as we've discussed, like Necrons have a whole bunch of units that are really good. Like we've discussed Silent King, Destroyers, the Convergence. We touched a little bit on Tomb Blades as well. Like you said, they run onto objectives, they do the actions, score your points. That's all they need to do. But we wanted to save the best to last,
We did.
and that
My
is,
favourite.
yeah, the Flayed ones. These guys. Well, tell us all about them, James, and how incredible these guys are.
These guys are ludicrously cheap.
Hmm.
About a year ago, same time as the Destroyers all went down, Flayed ones went down to 10 points a model.
I
And
remember that day we were at Nottingham GT.
this was
I
it.
think it was Nottingham GT,
Yeah.
and we were reading it. I was playing Crusher Stampede at the time. You were using Necrons, and I was reading. I was like, oh, no, that can't be right. 10 points, nah, that's
And
wrong.
I was running a list of 40.
You were, yeah.
And I was like, my list just got it just got 120 points cheaper just for the Flayed ones.
It's outrageous,
It
absolutely
was
outrageous.
crazy. I mean, honestly, and they are amazing.
Hmm.
Their actual data slate pretty solid. Nothing screams too strong, too overpowered.
Yeah.
3 attacks each, strength 4, AP 1. They explode on 6s against not vehicles.
Yeah.
They have a -2 leadership aura, which I have to say has come up a few times.
It's certainly not nothing. Like there
You
are
know,
times where it'll be really useful.
It's fine, when you push a unit of, leadership 8 unit down to leadership 6 and you kill 3 or 4 of them and then the last guy runs away, it's not terrible.
Hmm.
Sorry, did have a little
That's
bit.
all right.
We're going to cut that bit.
Yeah, it's all good.
They're 5 inches, 6 inches with a noble movement. But the really key thing is, a little bit like Warriors, you can use reanimation protocols to gain that extra movement. A lot of the power I find with Flayed ones is you stick 3 or 4 out of a building, something big fires into them. Here's my Contemptor that wants to try kill all 20. Here's my, Gatling cannon. They might kill 15. You roll your reanimation, you get another 5. You keep them behind the wall. You then roll your leadership. Maybe you fail leadership. End of your turn, you might only have 7 or 8 left.
Yeah.
You then use your resurrection orb to bring back 6 or 7, and then you just daisy chain up the board. So say you brought 6 back, that's an extra 6 inches of movement. You bring another one back, the Technomancer, that's another 7 inches of movement. They then move 6, so then they've moved 12 inches.
But James, you said that Flayed ones only have a 5-inch move.
They do only have a 5-inch move.
This sounds like 14.
I mean, it's a lot more than 14 some games.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, I've seen it in action where you can just daisy chain all these models to places that the opponent absolutely did not expect.
This is the really, really amazing thing. Like, I can start on one objective. You kill a load of Flayed ones, or Warriors. Warriors also do the same. I use that resurrection orb. You snake away. You tap another objective. You score your primary at the end of the command phase. Suddenly, you might score 12 points when you're only going to score 4. You might score 8 when you weren't going to score any.
Well,
And you can have such a swing that way.
On the bright side, it's a good thing. Like these guys aren't troops, so they're not upset. Oh wait.
This is where the Nihilak build comes in. Make them Nihilak, make them OBSEC. They do just what Warriors do. They do it in melee. They have more attacks. Fine, great.
Yeah.
Then the kind of little cherry on top, they have a 2 CP stratagem to fight twice.
That is foul.
And you've seen this yourself.
Mhm.
The amount of movement they get anyway when you fight twice, they can go almost 40 inches aboard sometimes. Like it's crazy, and especially when you run into something like an Imperial Knight, and you think, well, they're strength 4, AP 1, they're not going to kill a knight, but the Silent King's 9 inches away, and I've trailed 4 or 5 back, so I've got 15 guys with 45 attacks, hitting on 2s, rerolling all wounds, and then they fight twice.
Yeah.
That night.
And even like you said, you look at them, you go, "Oh, strength 4, that's not too bad." But unless I'm mistaken, there's a generic Necron stratagem for +1 strength.
Yeah, there is.
And when you're re-rolling wounds, you've literally doubled your effectiveness against toughness 8 things.
It's amazing. Exactly. You go from winning on 6s to winning on 5s to re-rolling it all, and then you fight again, and it's just they kill everything and anything.
It's horrific, absolutely horrific.
And as I say, with the playstyle of you move the king up slowly, the flayed ones that you really use is that first wave. You send the flayed ones in, they tear apart whatever there is, and at 200 points a unit, you're not going to be sad because they're always generally going to trade up. Especially when you then couple on the fact their resilience when they get fired into, there's a -1 to hit stratagem. A lot of the time you're going to put the Chronometron kind of the invuln on them, so they've got a 5-pin invuln -1 to hit. They're not the easiest unit to pick up.
No, they're definitely not. Like as you said, you put the Chronometron on them, the 5-up invuln. Toughness 4 like doesn't sound like a lot, but it means like your bolt guns and stuff. It means they're very rarely going to be wounding on 2s from the weapons that really want to be firing at them, like your onslaught Gatling cannons and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it, and that's kind of generally where they come, they really shine. I've been running at least 20 in kind of 90% of my lists for a long time. I only really dropped them when Flamers of Tzeentch came up. Really, really powerful. They had that one or 2 CP strat to get max shots, and it basically meant even if you had a 5-pin run, you lost the whole unit at 20.
Yeah.
That was really the only time I went away from Flayed ones. Ever since they got nerfed and the Flamers of Tzeentch went to hitting, they actually had to hit. I've gone back and we're full Flayed ones again.
Yeah, and it's like I've played against you with World Eaters and against your list with the Flayed ones, and Flayed ones are in such an awkward position where they're cheap enough that they can be your screen.
Yeah,
and they're so deadly that people have to deal with them.
Yeah,
and so when 5 Berserkers, for example, isn't enough because they're not going to kill 20 Flayed ones, not even close. No. So I have to dedicate something like 5 8-bound, which is one of my elite hardest hitting units into a unit of Flayed ones just to kill them. And it's like, great, my 200-point unit has just killed another 200-point unit that was just your screen.
Yeah.
And now they're right in the open. They're going to be shot to hell.
That's it, And this is why I've gone to moving to building on unit of warriors again. Partly because of World Eaters, because the problem is if I've got 40 Flayed ones, sure I can send another 20 at you, but then you're just going to fight on death and kill the other unit at 20. Exactly. And I lose out in the end anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and the warrior blob does have so much synergy with the Flayed one blob because they're 2 massive blobs that almost perform the polar opposites of one another, so they can really shore up each other's weaknesses.
That's it, exactly that.
Yeah, and
by far one of my favorite units. I adore the models.
Yeah.
My only bugbear with them is they are very expensive.
Yes, they are.
I was very fortunate to get a lot of my 40 through the Imperium magazine.
Yes.
For anyone now trying to build a unit of 20 or even 2 units of 20, I take my hat off to you if you can actually get it done.
Yeah, fair play, guys. Like 20 Flayed ones alone is a task, but 40, like
it's a lot of work. Even painting and building them is hard.
Yeah, they have more detail than you expect. Like they got the skin cloaks covering them and the claws and everything like that. But yeah, it's nice to see that these guys are really good in some ways that people might not expect. I've seen a lot of people run them as just 5-man units, deep striking in, doing
Yeah.
R&D, but they have so much more potential than that.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I mean, at 10 points a model, sure, you can run 6 to do your secondaries like that. But if you're taking retrieve battlefield data, you're not taking ancient machineries,
Yeah,
which is arguably just a better retrieve battlefield data.
yeah, agreed.
Because on a bad day, ancient machineries is an easy 8, where retrieve battlefield data is a solid 8. Not always going to be 8 if you're going to lose hard.
Yeah, it can be challenging if your opponent screens outright as well.
Exactly.
Definitely. But yeah, I mean, Necrons have such good units. Like Flayed ones, in my opinion, along with the Silent King being at the top of the pack, and the army's just really solid, man. And you've been having really good success with them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very good success. Really, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like, where did you place in
I think
ITC?
so. I was the second in the world and first in the UK.
That's man, that's impressive. Well done, man.
Thank you.
You should be. Yeah, I mean, I know you are proud, but you
No,
actually should be,
it's
especially
buzzing,
with especially with an army that people I don't think have quite grasped just how strong they are. Like you've really shown, hey, look, guys, this army ain't that bad. It's actually really really good. Like
the strength really more than anything is that reanimation protocol ability.
definitely,
Like,
yeah.
I have won games off the back of that ability just because they go in, they kill 2/3 of your units, and then you just bring them all back, and they might as well have not even bothered.
Reminds me of a certain round 3 game at St Albans. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean maybe.
Yeah.
I may have brought a whole unit of 20 back.
Yeah, managed to kill a Necron warrior down to one guy left, literally one, and before I know it, James is all 20.
Yeah,
Not exaggerating, all 20.
yeah. He's not even kidding. It was all 20.
Yeah, brutal game, and it shows just how strong reanimation is. Like it totally swings a game massively into your favor.
It's huge. It really, really, really is huge.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking of that game, like you're gonna have lists planned. Like you spent all this time researching all these units, and now this is your opportunity to show off what kind of lists that you've built, what you're going to take the tournaments by storm with.
So well, I mean, so I'm glad you said this. So initially, I was running a Nihilak build. That was kind of where we pivoted to. Played very similarly to how my other list played. Very different because I wasn't running 2 Doom Scythes and kind of these small units of destroyers. I was back to my big blobs. And then World Eaters came out, and I was like, I have very limited capacity to deal with the tricks World Eaters can pull off.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what, we're going to try Saltec, which is a real odd one, because the actual Saltec trait is pretty bad.
It's okay. It's not, like you said, it's not amazing.
I mean, rapid fire at 18 inches at reroll morale, which on the big blobs, reroll morale may come up every now and then. Yeah. Rapid fire at 18 definitely makes Flayer warriors worth taking, which I actually did take this weekend, and actually very, very impressed. I'd run a few games with them before and been very impressed with them. Being able to kind of keep things at 18-inch range meant you weren't always guaranteed to be charged. I always find with the Reaper warriors, you push them up, you get within your 12-inch range, and then you get charged the next turn.
Yeah, definitely. It's just a little bit too short range.
And this is where the 18-inch, I mean, in the game we played, the 18-inch came up really, really big.
It did. Yeah, it really did. Like, it meant, because we were playing on Data Scry Salvage, where the mission objectives, they're quite close together, but obviously they're spread across the whole length of the board. So when you could rapid fire at me from one objective to the other, it's actually a pretty big deal.
All from my deployment zone to your deployment zone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, out a little bit and then firing almost across the whole no man's land. Now, that all being said, that's great. Saltec do have a really nice little relic, which I didn't take, which is just it's like a Judiseer on a stick. It's just a 3-inch Fight Last relic.
Yeah, Fight Last is always good. It's always good to have.
You've got it on the Silent King anyway, so not necessarily needed in this list. The main reason is Nemesaur Zandrek.
This guy.
A really cool bit of tech.
You would see him everywhere if he wasn't for Saltec.
Exactly. And I do like building little tech pieces into my lists. I always take the hex mark pretty much in every list I take. just to help deal with those little pesky 5 or 6 man deep strikers. If he doesn't, he can pop down and just sit on an objective. The main ability from Nemesis Landrek, who is also an overlord, so he gets another My Will Be Done, so that's fine.
Nice.
Third unit has My Will Be Done. He's got this really fluffy madness ability where he rolls against Necron's leadership on 3d6. And if you get lower, you get to pick one of the buffs. If you get higher, you roll for it. I found myself rolling for it a lot more and giving stuff like Scorpec Destroyers, +1 ballistic skill, success. Really, really handy.
I think that happened exactly against us in our
It
game,
did twice.
Yeah.
And cool ability. I mean, it's nice. When you do get a pick, the Convergence gives +2 leadership, so it makes it a little bit more likely. One of those D3 abilities is +1 attack. So there's a few times I could put that on the Flayed ones or the Scorpec, really, really boost their efficiency up even more. Amazing.
Yeah, now, suddenly you're halfway to Novog.
Yeah, pretty much, right? You just need extra AP.
Yeah, exactly.
Now the really main thing here is counter tactics.
I hate this.
Which is an ability once per game, map wide, doesn't need to be in range, doesn't need to see you. When an opponent uses a stratagem, you can engage counter tactics. And when you do so, that opponent cannot use that stratagem until the end of the battle round. Now,
that's an important part.
It's an important part. They do get to keep the CP, so they don't spend the CP for it, which is, fine trade. But it means, if someone tries to do that 2 CP interrupt, that's going to ruin your day. You could go, no, counter tactics, you're not going to interrupt.
Yeah.
In the game Liam and I played, I was kind of almost saving it for Fight on Death. Yes. What I actually ended up using it for was he was slow rolling his saves for a unit of 8 bound and objective, because we knew if he lost another 8 bound, he'd lose the objective.
Yeah.
And you failed the save, and you went to CP re-roll it, and I engaged the counter tactics, couldn't re-roll it, the 8 bound died, and then I held the objective, which then meant I went from holding 4 primary to holding 12, and it was a huge swing very early on.
It's massive, and I can tell you now, the amount of salt that people will get when they're playing against Nemesis Andrek and they're going for a charge. It's a nice, easy charge, a 6-inch charge, for example. You roll it, and you go, I failed it. That's a shame. Well, that's so good. I'll just CP re-roll it. And then you go,
And the even worse thing is say you fight, you fire a weapon and you really wanted it to hit in your shooting phase, and you go to re-roll it, and I engage it then. Then when you get into a charge phase, you still can't re-roll.
So good.
And if you've gone first, and we go into my turn, and I hit you with a men here, and you go, oh no, that's my chaplain. He's out of, he's mispositioned or he's lost his unit. This is going to kill him, and I've failed the save. I'll just re-roll. Nope. No, not allowed to re-roll it.
That's disgusting. And that exact thing came up in another game that we played. Again, World Eaters versus Necrons. I got the first turn. Pre-game moved right into your lines, charged into your Flayed ones, and you interrupted. So I elected to fight on death. And you said, no, that's not okay.
No fighting on death.
That's not allowed. So I was like, okay, that sucks, but whatever. It goes to your turn, and you charge your Scorpec into my 8 bound. And me, being the dum-dum that I am, say, this is fine. I'll just spend 2 CP and fight on death.
Yeah.
But no, that's not allowed.
It's still battle round 1, Liam.
Yeah, I was like, what? What do you mean it lasts all battle round? This is outrageous.
Now,
it's essentially Vect back in 8th edition, but better.
Yeah, it's really, really strong.
Yeah, it really is.
Now, I think in hindsight, having played it, I think I played 6 or 7 games at Soutech now. I will be dropping it, because I think there are ways to play around the kind of fight on death World Eaters that I've kind of learned having played them a couple of times. Part of it is just accepting you're going to throw a unit to them, they're going to fight on death and kill it.
Yeah.
It's just trying to pick where they can do that and which units you're happy losing.
Yeah, definitely.
Still don't really have an answer for the Heroic Intervene 6, but I think we're just going to have to take that one on the chin.
Yeah. That's fair.
It'll be interesting against Guard whether I change my mind when they do the Cascarin strat.
Yes.
The Mortal Wounds on 6s, I think, will
Yeah,
I
so
don't know specifically what it is, but
it's interesting because then you kind of have a choice because there's two stratagems that make the whole thing work. They go for sixes to wound, do mortal wounds, and hit rolls of 5 count as an auto wound, and a 6 to wound because of born soldiers.
yeah, I think I'll probably always go for the mortals. Because the
Yeah,
mortals is Necrons really really struggle against mortals. Even when you do mortal wounds on a fight or a shoot attack,
mm,
you do still get a reanimation. But as we saw in our game, you spike those and you get that 6 mortal wounds. That can be me surviving with a couple of warriors or flayed ones to me surviving with none.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And essentially, a mortal wound against the majority of your army, being like the flayed ones, an extra mortal wound is twice the lethality.
That's it exactly.
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely.
which is weird, me having taken this to a tournament, ironically winning the tournament with this list and not wanting to play
Congratulations,
the
by the
list
way.
again.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a hard fought final, honestly. You gave me a good game.
I tried, but hey, man. Necron's too good, man.
That's it. What can I say? No,
Yeah.
it was good, and it was really nice to see kind of the the things that are strong about Necrons actually work into World Eaters. When I
Mm.
think when we played before, the first time we played, I'd kind of struggled because World Eaters were new, and I didn't quite know, oh, how do I do this? How do I fight this? Like,
Yeah.
what's the tactic here?
Mm. It's a good way to learn as well. Like you got a tech piece that gives you a little bit of a safety net against these new armies, and then from there you can then think, okay, how could I have played without that safety net? Yeah. No, it's
And,
definitely a really good idea.
and this is it. The key thing for me is I can take him out of the list, take the Immortals out of the list,
Hmm.
and add some more flayed ones.
That's always
And
what you're
then
gonna do.
on the back of that, I can go back to Nihilak, go back
Hmm.
to a lot easier scoring. This is the one thing I did find about running Sautek, and what I found about running Novok historically is trying to get those ancient machineries off early game can be quite difficult because the only thing you've got moves 5 or 6 inches. So you
Yeah.
can't get to those kind of hard to score objectives you want to do early. You've got
Mhm.
to do the safe ones early.
Yeah.
You can't send that unit of 3 Tomb Blades up and cover the relics straight away and score the one on their side of the board and then worry about the 2 on your side of the board for your easy 12. You're looking at an 8 and a
Yeah.
hard 12.
Yeah, definitely.
Which kind of brings us on. Go on.
No, sorry, you were going to say.
No, I was going to say, it kind of brings us on to where my kind of planned list going forward is that very much thing. We're going back to Nihilak. We're
Hmm.
taking more flayed ones, and we're going to see how it goes.
Yeah, like as we discussed before, Nihilak with the getting the obsec and the stuff you can do with the reanimation protocol, stringing out onto the objectives that the opponent wouldn't expect to. It's just massive, and it can swing a primary from 4 points to 12 points, like just like that.
And this, I mean, that very thing happened game 2 on the weekend
Mm.
against Grey Knights. He's got some guys who are in his obsec bubble. He's got 3 of them on the objective. I've only got 2 warriors.
Yeah.
I use my Technomancer to revive D3 warriors, get 2 back, then
Mhm.
take that objective. And then I use the Resolve on the flayed ones to string up to the next one. That's empty because he's cleared everything off that objective. And then hold that one. So I go from holding 4 to holding 12.
It's real good.
And it's so strong. Like just the
Yeah.
ability to kind of go through that. And extra unit flayed ones gives me that redundancy to send one out in the first turn. Maybe half of it dies, maybe 2/3 of it, maybe the whole thing dies. But I've then got that backup unit to then go in and kind of replace it as the game moves on.
Yeah. And yeah, like, as you said, and with the amount of models that you have, like looking at your list here, like you've got 40 flayed ones, you've got another 20 warriors, and
Yeah.
some armies, like the first one that pops into my head is Imperial Knights, specifically Loyalists, not Chaos. They will look at those 60 infantry men and just go, I just can't deal with that.
Yeah.
I just don't have the volume of
I think
firepower to deal with that.
if they're running lightning locks, they can actually.
That's true, yeah.
I have had that before. But the problem is that they've got to put the lightning locks in and some of the Hellrinds and probably the big knight to kill a 20. When I've played knights, that's usually what happens.
Yeah.
Which means they're not shooting at the Skull Peg, they're not shooting at the Locust Destroyers, they're not firing at the Silent King. That's fine. And if they do then fire into one of those, the 20 flayed ones, as we discussed before, will just run in and pick up knights.
Yeah. And like you said, Imperial Knights might have the damage output to deal with these big blobs, but it's split across 5 units.
Yeah.
So that's 5 separate activations that you're getting a reanimation from.
And usually when I'm going up against that kind of list, with the Silent King's Warlord trait, I'm doubling up on Undying Legion's protocol to reroll one reanimation roll. When they're putting 5 or 6 units into one unit and you're rerolling one every single time, it can be the difference between having 5 flayed ones at the end of their shooting to having 9 or 10.
Yeah, it's massive, definitely. And yeah, it's really interesting to see. Like, you essentially just have tech pieces for everything that you need to do.
Yeah.
Like you got the big blobs to control the majority of the board. They will get you your primary.
Yeah.
And then you got the Tomb Blades, Russian Objective, Ancient Machineries, also Score Treasure. Like, they just feel 2 rolls in one. I just can't get over how good they are.
That's exactly it, and they do. And I think, I've got the convergence for behind enemy lines. I don't think you can quite see it because I think it's been cut off at the top. I do run one plasma sight.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Hexmark Destroyer is a destroyer, so the plasma sight survives. He doesn't automatically die if you bring them both together.
That's interesting.
And they're separate units, so there's actually 4 points of behind enemy lines.
Yeah, of course.
So on those matchups where you think, well, the Hexmarks, I'm playing knights, turn 6 AP ones, terrible. Fine, just throw them in the enemy's deployment zone.
Yeah.
3 points. Stick a plasma sight with him, that's another point on top.
And that's exactly the thing. Like, there was a lot of positive feedback. The Necron secondaries were nerfed because they did need to be nerfed. Like, they were a little bit too optimized.
I think,
but when they've been nerfed in such a way that the buff to behind enemy lines totally negates all that, like, they're still really strong.
I think that this is it. Behind enemy lines and engage being a lot better, especially utilizing things like small units of Tomb Blades. The big blobs. You can use a unit of Ophidians. You can use even the Silent King, actually, because he's a starting unit of 3, can do engage. When you can get that extra convergence in an easy deployment zone, an easy table quarter, and you throw the Silent King at them, and then he's now in the hard one. You've then got your 4 quarters, so then you're getting 3 on engage rather than 2, and your convergence is a vehicle, so he does it on his own. As what we said before, you don't want to shoot him because he's hard to shoot, and you want to put that weapon into the Silent King instead. And this is kind of how the list works. It's built on redundancy of scoring those secondaries kind of as and when I need them to be scored. And most games I'm scoring 80 to 90 points.
Yeah,
generally, if I'm losing, maybe it's under 80, but it's not under 70.
Yeah, like you said, I can't remember the last time when you scored under 70 with an OBSEC Necrons list. I know we were discussing Novok, and we do still think that Novok has a place, but for the kind of, especially the playstyle that you like, Nihilak seems to be like...
I think, because this is the thing, I could run the same list as Novok, pretty much almost identical.
Yeah, definitely.
And do just as well, hit harder in combat, but score worse.
Yes.
And if I'm scoring worse, and the list does a little bit worse, but mostly the same as Nihilak, I've got to be running Nihilak.
Yeah, definitely.
That's basically the answer. There's no kind of there's no flip side. I do think Novok is very strong if you're going very full on flayed ones. If you're going to the coveted 60 flayed ones.
Yeah.
And I think Novoks, you want that 8-inch charge. You can't be failing those charges with him. You want the extra AP. You want to be pushing really deep into their line and just ripping everything apart.
Yeah.
And then you can score your secondaries.
Yeah, like you said, that 8-inch charge does make the difference between a deep strike charge being not very likely to actually being a pretty decent chance of making it.
And that's why I think Novok has play, because you can do what we've said, where you're snaking up the board with reanimation with one unit, and then in the next turn you bring in a second unit with an 8-inch charge. You're going to have that CP to reroll. They're probably looking at 40 flayed ones, or 30 to 40.
That's a massive double whammy. Like, and not many people are going to be able to deal with that, especially when they're strength 5 and they have the bonus attack and they can be AP -3 in Novog.
Well, this is why I love Novog. Having that double benefit on Hungry Void, the +1 strength and the +1 AP on 6s, it just makes them crazy. You know, they go to strength 6 with the stratagem.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's fine. All that P5 stuff, who cares? I'm winning all 3s anyway.
Yeah, that's brutal, man. Like, there's I can't think of anything in the game that survives a full unit of 20 flayed ones.
There's very, very little. I think back in the day of Armor of Contempt, Scarab Cult Terminators did.
Yeah.
Because they got +1 for Armor of Contempt, +1 because it's damage 1. So then the AP2 from Novog, they ignore it all.
Yeah.
The other thing I've really struggled with historically is our friend Valorous Heart for the same thing, because it just ignores AP1 and 2. Oh, I think reduces AP2 to AP1.
That's it, yeah. And especially if you're going up against something like a Paragon Warsuit, who are vehicles, so you don't get that exploding 6s. Yeah.
But then this is where you flip it on the head and you think, well, okay, I might have 2 up saves, but if I make you roll 60 saves, you're going to fail a few.
Yeah. It's like, it's just that it shows how much synergy the army has when you think of a potential weakness that your list with Necrons could have, and then just an inclusion of one unit totally shores up that weakness. Like flayed ones, you think, oh, like then they're great, but as soon as you come up against something high toughness, that's where they really fail. But then the Silent King gives them reroll wounds.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh, I've got flayed ones of the Silent King, but it means my early turn presence won't be very good because they're slow. They need to move up the board. And that's where you got Tomb Blades that can just.
It's where you've got Ophidians. It's where you've got. I mean, and this is kind of how I've landed on this list. Like, it's got good early pressure. It's got good mid game pressure, and it's got good ability to continue scoring late into the game when you've lost a lot of your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know Necrons inside and out. I look at the list and I think it's great, and I know that it's going to perform well. Like, you know the list that you've built so well that you can take this against pretty much any army, and you will perform well. Even if it's a loss, you're going to score like 70+ points.
And this is it, and this is where the power of that OBSEC comes in, because even when they've killed all the warriors and they've killed all the flayed ones, you've still got your lord who's OBSEC.
Yeah.
So he's still holding an objective. That's still 4 points. You've still got your Tomb Blade who's whizzing around. He's still OBSEC. He can do an ancient machineries.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the scoring really, really kicks into the kind of next gear with Nihilak and with the kind of old days of the OBSEC, pre-game move Dynasty.
Yeah. And like you said, like, it's so important. It doesn't seem that important when you have like a Chronomancer or a Technomancer that has OBSEC. And at first you're just like, it's nice to have. But when he uses the Veil of Darkness, because I know that's a relic you like to take a lot, and suddenly he's in a position where he might be able to tow onto an objective, and he's character blocked, so with Lookout Sir, so you'll want to charge him. You want to charge him with something that might not be OBSEC. Like, let's be real, like, a lot of powerful melee threats don't tend to be OBSEC.
No, well, this is it, right?
Exactly. You charge in, they charge in, probably kill the character, they're not very tanky, and then you got a revive stratagem. And
this is where, so I've actually shifted the Veil onto the Chronomancer, which I used to do quite a long time ago, because the Chronomancer's got a 4-bin run. Okay. So that kind of, those small little units that are just, they're there to kill a little thing, go into a Chronomancer. If you roll well, he doesn't die. And then if he does die, as you said, there's the resurrection stratagem where 1 CP on a 4-up, he comes back. Yes, it's only a 4-up. Yes, I went about 13 times in a row failing it. But the times you do pass it and he pops back up and he's OBSEC, suddenly actually, from them having killed him and taken it, they no longer hold it. You hold it in your turn. You continue scoring that primary. Just really solid.
And it's such a horrible feeling when you revive him and you suddenly realise the end of the fight phase. I have no possible way to stop him. Yeah. He's going to get 12 on primary again.
No.
What can I do? I'm just stuck.
That's it. And that's the whole list works around that kind of resilience and kind of just tanking trades. People trying to trade into the list and it not being able to trade into.
Yeah. Yeah,
And as you
I
said,
love that.
you ran 5 berserkers into 20 warriors, killed 19 of them.
Hmm.
There's 20 next turn. You might as well have not made the charge and bothered.
Yeah, it's as
All,
if I failed the charge but somehow put myself in an even worse
yeah.
position.
And that's the thing, though. It's not even not only have you done that, you've given me extra movement
Hmm.
and scored me more primary than I would have done
I
from
just
doing something you want to do in your turn.
I
It's
just
really counterintuitive almost.
I just felt bad for you. I wanted to give you some advantage,
That's it.
Like, I wanted to give you that move. You really needed it. So, yeah, I mean, we've discussed most of the things that we wanted to discuss from Necrons, like the changes that they've had across all of Ninth Edition. Most recently with Arks of Omen, all the
Yeah.
changes they brought in. We've taken a look at the units, the ones that you love, and the ones that are really, really solid as well.
I think
Which dynasties are good? Sorry, carry on.
no, I think that's it. I think the units we've discussed really are the mainstay of the good stuff in Necrons. We could go into stuff like the Doomsday Arcs and Annihilation Barges. They're just not worth talking about competitively because they're just not a good option to take. And it's sad because I've got 2 Annihilation Barges I'd love to bring out and use. I've got Lich Guard with War Sites I'd love to take out and use. I've got tons of models I would love to use competitively. I just don't match really what you want them to do, and that's the kind of main gripe I really have with Necrons at the moment. Other
Yeah,
than that, I think they're amazing.
yeah, some of their fixes have been very like, oh, just slap core on it, it'll be all right. When, like, as you said with the, I think it's the Doomsday arc, D6 shots and D6 damage. Hey, it could be 36, but it's also probably going to be 1. Let's be real. Right? Assuming they even fail a save, or if you even hit. but no, like, yeah, Necrons are really, really solid. Like, you do have to play them in a certain way, like we discussed. You got to go Nahalak or Novok. You got to run Flayed once. Like, man, run Flayed once. Silent King is going to be there. Tomb Blades as well. Some Destroyers. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we've mostly talked about what we wanted to talk about. Is there anything you wanted to add, or?
No, I mean that's something I could go on. I'm sure we'll do another episode on Necrons in a few months. I mean, if the rumors are true and 10th edition does give us something to go on, I'm sure we'll be talking about how Necrons are all changed and what they're doing there.
Yeah, there'll be plenty more to discuss. So yeah, just wanted to say massive thank you to everyone who's tuned in, listened to our episode. We do really appreciate it. Please remember to like and subscribe. It does really, really help us out. Leave a comment. We're always replying. We're more than happy to chat with you guys. And
Awesome.
yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
guys. Take care.